This is the face of a god king. Golden, eternal, perfect. For 3,000 years, Tutankhamun slept undisturbed beneath the desert sands, while grave robbers ransacked every other pharaoh's tomb. But when Howard Carter finally found him in 1922, what happened next wasn't archaeology. It was desecration. To remove this mask, Carter and his team had to destroy the very thing they came to preserve. They dismembered a king. They sawed through bone. They melted flesh with heated knives. And that brutal act in a sealed tomb triggered a chain reaction. That would topple empires, birth conspiracy theories, and rewrite the rules of who owns the past. This is the story of how one forgotten boy king became immortal by being torn apart. Part 1. The Irony of Erasure. Let's start with the question nobody asks. Why was Tutankhamun's tomb the only one found intact? Think about it. Ramses the Great ruled for 67 years. He built monuments that still stand today. His name was carved into granite across an empire. But his tomb, stripped bare in antiquity. Seti I, military genius. Conquered territories from Libya to Syria. His tomb, looted. Thutmose III, the Napoleon of ancient Egypt. 17 military campaigns without a single defeat. His tomb, empty. So why did Tutankhamun, a physically disabled teenager, who died at 19 after accomplishing almost nothing, get to keep his treasures? The answer is as dark as it is ironic. He was protected by hate. Tutankhamun's father was Akhenaten, the heretic king who tried to destroy 3,000 years of Egyptian religion. Akhenaten banned the old gods. He closed the temples. He built a new capital in the desert and forced his people to worship only one god, the sun disk called the Aten. When Akhenaten died, Egypt breathed a collective sigh of relief. And then they erased him. Not just from monuments, from history itself. This is called damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. The Romans would later perfect this punishment, but the Egyptians invented it. Every inscription bearing Akhenaten's name was chiseled away. Every statue was smashed, every reference was removed. And his son? Tutankhamun? He got the same treatment. The pharaohs who came after him, Horemheb and Ramses I, dated their reigns as if Akhenaten and Tutankhamun had never existed. Official king lists skipped right over them. Here's where it gets interesting. 20 years after Tutankhamun was buried, workers building the tomb of Ramses VI needed to carve a path through the rocky hillside. They hauled limestone chips and debris down the slope. And they buried the entrance to Tutankhamun's tomb under tons of rubble. They had no idea he was down there. Nobody did. For 3 millennia, while tomb raiders systematically looted every other burial site in the valley, Tutankhamun lay beneath a forgotten construction zone. The very people who tried to erase his memory from history accidentally built him the most effective security system ever devised. Complete and total obscurity. Part 2. The Autopsy Room. November 1922. Howard Carter stands in front of a sealed doorway in the Valley of the Kings. His hand is shaking as he makes a small hole in the plaster. He holds up a candle. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, asks, "Can you see anything?" Carter replies, "Yes, wonderful things." That moment is famous. What came next is not. For 3 years, Carter and his team photographed and cataloged over 5,000 objects crammed into 4 small rooms. It was the greatest archaeological discovery in history. But there was a problem: the mummy itself. By October 1925, Carter could no longer delay the inevitable. He needed to examine the body of the king. Dr. Douglas Derry, the anatomy professor from Cairo University, arrived with his instruments. What they found in the innermost coffin was not what anyone expected. The embalmers had been too generous with the consecration oils. These sacred unguents were poured over the mummy in massive quantities during the burial ritual. Over 3,000 years, those oils had undergone a chemical transformation. They had hardened into something like black resin, thick, rock-solid, unbreakable. The mummy was cemented to the bottom of the solid gold coffin. Carter tried everything. He placed the coffin in the desert sun, hoping the heat would soften the resin. It didn't work. He considered chemical solvents, but feared they would damage the wrappings. No solution worked. So Carter made a decision that would haunt his reputation forever. He would cut the mummy free. Dr. Derry heated his surgical instruments over an open flame. The knives glowed red. They began. First, they cut away the outer wrappings. Beneath the linen, they found layer after layer of gold amulets, each placed according to precise religious specifications. Over 143 pieces of jewelry were embedded in the wrappings. To catalog each one, they had to cut through the arms, the legs, the torso. But the head was the real problem. The golden mask was stuck to the skull with the same hardened resin that had glued the body to the coffin. There was no way to remove it gently. Carter and Derry did what they had to do. They severed the head from the body. They used heated knives to separate the mask from the skull, working slowly, millimeter by millimeter, melting the ancient resin as they went. When they were done, they had the mask. But Tutankhamun's body was in pieces. Both arms had been removed at the shoulder. Both legs were detached at the hip. The torso was split. The head was separate. The rib cage had been cut open to remove amulets. Even the penis had been broken off during the unwrapping, though it was later mysteriously lost. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. After they finished, Carter and Derry placed the dismembered pieces onto a sand tray. They arranged the parts to look whole. Then they took photographs. Those official photos, the ones published in scientific journals and shown in museums around the world, they show a complete mummy. But it wasn't complete. It was a reassembled corpse, held together by sand and wishful thinking. Now you might ask, was this necessary? Could they have done it differently? The answer is complicated. By the standards of 1925, Carter was actually being careful. Earlier excavators had simply smashed open coffins with crowbars and tossed aside anything that wasn't gold. Carter at least documented every step. But here's the uncomfortable truth. He wasn't just a scientist. He was also a treasure hunter working for a wealthy patron who expected a return on his investment. The line between archaeology and grave robbery has always been thinner than we'd like to admit. And in that tomb in 1925, that line disappeared entirely. Part 3. The Political Battlefield. While Carter was cutting apart a 3,000-year-old king, another kind of battle was raging above ground. Egypt in 1922 was a nation in transition. For decades, it had been a British protectorate. The British controlled the Suez Canal. They controlled the military. They controlled everything that mattered. But in 1922, just months before Carter found the tomb, Britain granted Egypt nominal independence. Nominal, that's the key word. Egypt had a king now, Fuad I, but British troops remained. British advisors remained. And British archaeologists still operated under the old rules. The old rules were simple. When you found something in Egypt, you got to keep half of it. The Egyptian government took 50% for their museums. The excavator took 50% for his sponsor. That's how it had always worked. Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy aristocrat who funded Carter's work, expected his share. He had invested 17 years and a fortune into the search for Tutankhamun. Now he wanted his return. But Egypt's new government had other ideas. Pierre Lacaux, the French director of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, declared that the tomb's contents were too important to be divided. Everything would stay in Egypt, every single object.
After all this work, you think you can just shut us down? These finds belong to the world, not your dusty ledgers.
This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. He had spent years in the desert. He had found what everyone said was impossible to find. And now the Egyptian government was rewriting the rules in the middle of the game. In February 1924, Carter made a catastrophic mistake. He locked the tomb, sent his workers home, and issued a public statement accusing the Egyptian government of interfering with his work. Then he left Egypt. The Egyptian government responded immediately. They revoked Carter's excavation permit. They sent guards to secure the tomb. They changed the locks.
I am losing everything because of your incompetence. Fix this now, or there will be consequences.
The situation at the Giza Plateau requires immediate attention, Minister. We are facing significant logistical challenges.
For 9 months, the most famous archaeological site in the world sat sealed and silent while diplomats and lawyers argued. But something remarkable was happening. The Egyptian people were paying attention. For the first time in modern history, Egyptians were united around a symbol of their ancient past. Tutankhamun wasn't just a dead pharaoh anymore. He was a rallying cry. Egyptian newspapers ran headlines demanding that all artifacts stay in Egypt. Political cartoons showed British officials trying to steal national treasures. Students held protests. This wasn't just about archaeology. It was about sovereignty. It was about national identity. It was about a colonized nation finally saying, "This is ours, not yours." Carter eventually backed down. He apologized, he negotiated. And he was allowed to return to finish the excavation. But the world had changed. Never again would foreign excavators casually divide Egypt's heritage with a handshake and a contract. Tutankhamun had become more powerful in death than he ever was in life. He had helped liberate Egypt a second time. Part 4. The Media War. Now let's talk about the curse. You've heard the story. Lord Carnarvon enters the tomb in November 1922. By April 1923, he's dead. Blood poisoning from an infected mosquito bite. At the moment of his death, all the lights in Cairo mysteriously went out. At the same moment, 2,000 miles away in England, Carnarvon's dog let out a howl and dropped dead. Within 7 years, 11 people connected to the excavation were dead. The curse of the Pharaohs had struck again. Except none of that is true. Well, Carnarvon did die. That part is real. But the lights in Cairo? Cairo had constant power outages in 1923. The electrical system was a disaster. The dog? Nobody verified that story until decades later. And it comes from Carnarvon's surviving relatives who had every reason to mythologize the event. The 11 deaths? Out of the 58 people who were directly involved in opening the tomb, only 8 died within a decade. That's actually a lower mortality rate than the general population. Howard Carter, the man who spent more time in the tomb than anyone, who personally handled the mummy, who breathed in whatever ancient spores or toxins might have been present. He lived for 17 more years. He died at age 64 of lymphoma, a completely ordinary death for a man of his generation. So where did the curse come from? The answer reveals one of the first great fake news scandals of the 20th century. The Times of London had purchased exclusive rights to cover the excavation. Lord Carnarvon, always thinking about money, had sold them the story. Every other newspaper in the world was shut out. Reporters from the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Daily Mail, they all traveled to Egypt and found themselves blocked from the tomb. They couldn't get photos, they couldn't get interviews, they couldn't get information. But they still had papers to sell. So they did what desperate journalists have always done. They made something up. The curse narrative was irresistible. It had everything: ancient mysteries, deadly secrets, hubris punished by the gods. It didn't matter that there was no curse inscription in the tomb. Several reporters simply invented one. It didn't matter that Egyptologists explained that curses weren't part of ancient Egyptian burial practices. The public didn't care about facts. They wanted the story. And the story sold newspapers. Marie Corelli, a popular novelist of the time, wrote to the press claiming that she owned an ancient Arabic text that warned of dire consequences for anyone who disturbed a pharaoh's rest. She probably didn't own any such text. But her letter was reprinted around the world. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, publicly speculated that ancient Egyptians might have placed elementals in the tomb, supernatural guardians that could kill intruders. Conan Doyle, by the way, also believed in fairies and spent his later years promoting spiritualism. But people listened to him because he was famous. The curse narrative grew and mutated. Every death remotely connected to the tomb was added to the list. A radiologist who x-rayed the mummy died 3 years later. The curse. A visitor to the tomb died of a stroke back in England 5 years later. The curse. It didn't matter that these were mostly elderly people dying of ordinary causes. The myth was too good to kill. And here's the twisted irony. The curse actually helped protect Tutankhamun's legacy. It kept the story alive in popular culture. It made sure that a minor pharaoh who accomplished nothing in his reign would become the most famous Egyptian king in history. The fake news created real immortality. Conclusion: the true legacy. So what are we left with? A teenage king who died 33 centuries ago, who ruled for less than a decade, who never won a battle, never built a great monument, never did anything particularly memorable. And yet, walk into any museum in the world and mention Egypt, and people will say one name: Tutankhamun. His treasures have traveled the globe. Millions have stood in line for hours to see his golden mask. Books, movies, exhibitions, documentaries, his name is everywhere. He achieved what every pharaoh desperately wanted: true immortality. But the price was steep. His body was torn apart in the name of science. His privacy was violated. His sacred burial, meant to prepare him for the afterlife, was stripped away piece by piece and put on display for the entertainment of strangers. He was used as a political weapon. He was turned into a newspaper myth. He was commodified, commercialized, and sensationalized. And he can't protest. He can't object. He can't tell us if this is what he would have wanted. We made him immortal. But we did it on our terms, not his. Howard Carter once wrote, "The pharaoh came back to life for us. But at what cost?" He was talking about the damage to the mummy. But maybe he was talking about something deeper. Every great archaeological discovery forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Where is the line between preserving history and exploiting it? Between honoring the dead and profiting from them? Between scientific inquiry and cultural theft? In 1922, Carter believed he had every right to open that tomb. He believed he was serving knowledge, serving history, serving humanity. The Egyptian government believed he was plundering their heritage. The newspapers believed he was giving them something to sell. The public believed he was disturbing forces that should have remained buried. Who was right? Maybe everyone, maybe no one. What we know for certain is this: Tutankhamun died twice. The first time, in 1424 BC, probably from complications of malaria and a broken leg. Alone in a palace, a forgotten teenager in a kingdom eager to forget his family's heretical legacy. The second time, in 1925, on a sand tray in the Valley of the Kings, dismembered by men with heated knives who believed they were saving him for posterity. And in both deaths, he became something greater than he ever was in life. He became a symbol of Egypt's past glory and future hopes, of the power of discovery and the danger of obsession, of how the dead can be more influential than the living. 3,000 years after his heart stopped beating, Tutankhamun's name is spoken every single day in a dozen languages across every continent. Children learn his name in school. Scholars write dissertations about him. Tourists travel thousands of miles to stand in his tomb. If that isn't immortality, what is? But here's the final question I want to leave you with. Was it worth it? Did Howard Carter do what needed to be done? Was the dismemberment of the mummy a tragic but necessary sacrifice for science and knowledge? Or was it a violation that should never have happened? Should the tomb have been resealed and left untouched, respecting the ancient belief that the dead should rest in peace? There's no easy answer. Maybe that's the point. The boy king who achieved nothing in life has given us something precious in death. Not just golden treasures, but questions. Questions about who owns history, about the price of knowledge, about whether the dead have rights that the living must respect. Tutankhamun can't answer these questions. But you can. Let me take you deeper into one aspect of this story that often gets overlooked: the actual experience of being in that tomb. Imagine you're Howard Carter on that November afternoon in 1922. You've been working in the Valley of the Kings for 6 years with nothing to show for it. Your patron, Lord Carnarvon, has told you this is the final season. If you don't find something significant, the funding ends. You're down to your last few weeks. And then one of your Egyptian workers discovers a step cut into the bedrock beneath the entrance to the tomb of Ramses VI. You clear away the debris. 1 step becomes 2. 2 becomes 12. 16 steps down, you find a door. A sealed door. The seals bear the name of the necropolis guards who patrolled the valley 3,000 years ago. Your hands are shaking as you clear the blocked passageway beyond. It takes 3 days to remove 30 feet of rubble. Behind it, another sealed door. You make a small opening. You hold up a candle and peer through. What do you see? Gold. Everywhere gold. Animal statues, beds, chairs, chariots, boxes, all gleaming in the flickering candlelight. You've found an intact royal tomb. The only intact royal tomb ever discovered in the Valley of the Kings. In that moment, you're standing on the threshold between everything you've ever dreamed of and everything you've ever feared. Because you know what comes next. The world will descend on this place. The Egyptian government will stake its claim. The press will create a circus. And you, Howard Carter, will spend the next decade of your life trapped in the very success you've been chasing. You'll be famous. You'll be celebrated. But you'll never be free again. And more than that, you'll have to make impossible choices. Do you preserve or do you extract? Do you protect or do you display? Do you respect the ancient religious beliefs about the sanctity of burial, or do you serve the modern scientific imperative to study, understand, and share? Carter tried to do both. He failed. Not because he was cruel or careless, but because the task itself was impossible. You cannot violate something sacred without consequences, even if you do it in the name of knowledge. Even if you do it with the best intentions, even if you do it carefully, methodically, with documentation and respect, the violation remains. And that violation has echoed through the decades since. It changed how we think about archaeology. It sparked debates about cultural heritage and repatriation that continue today. Museums around the world are being forced to reckon with their collections. Who actually owns the Rosetta Stone? The Elgin marbles? The Benin bronzes? These questions didn't start with Tutankhamun, but his discovery brought them into the global spotlight in a way nothing else had. Because his tomb was the first major archaeological find in the age of mass media. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, newsreels in cinemas. Millions of people around the world followed the excavation in real time. They saw the photographs, they read the descriptions, they felt connected to the discovery. And that created something new. A sense that this wasn't just Egypt's heritage or Britain's discovery. It was humanity's shared past. But who gets to decide what that means? Who gets to say where the artifacts should rest? Who speaks for the dead pharaoh who left very clear instructions that his body and possessions were meant for the afterlife, not for museums? We've decided, collectively, that the advancement of human knowledge justifies the violation of those ancient wishes. We've decided that Tutankhamun's mummy teaches us more on display in a climate-controlled case in the Valley of the Kings than it would still wrapped in linen in a sealed coffin. We've decided that his treasures educate more people in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo than they would serving their original purpose of magically equipping a dead king for the underworld. Maybe we're right. Maybe the dead don't have the right to dictate terms to the living. Maybe our obligation is to learn, not to preserve ancient superstitions. Or maybe we're telling ourselves comfortable lies to justify what we want to do anyway. Because we want to see the gold mask. We want to marvel at the workmanship. We want to connect with the ancient world. And those desires, human and understandable as they are, override the desires of the people who created these objects in the first place. Tutankhamun has given us a gift. Not the gift he intended to give, but a gift nonetheless. He's given us a mirror. When we look at his story, we see ourselves. Our curiosity, our greed, our nobility, our exploitation, our endless human need to touch the past even when we know we'll damage it in the process. And perhaps that's the truest form of immortality. Not to be remembered as you were, but to become a canvas onto which each new generation projects their own questions, their own values, their own struggles. The boy king sleeps now in his tomb, his reconstructed mummy finally at rest after decades of study and display. But his story never sleeps. It keeps asking us questions, and we keep answering. And maybe, 3,000 years from now, someone will discover our tombs, our treasures, our carefully preserved remains. And they'll face the same choice Howard Carter faced: to open or to honor, to study or to respect, to claim the past for knowledge or to leave it in peace. What will they choose? What would we want them to choose? The pharaoh who became immortal by being torn apart would probably appreciate the irony. After all, the ancient Egyptians believed that to speak the name of the dead was to make them live again. And we haven't stopped speaking his name. We never will,